Welcome back, my tribe, to Howling After Dark. Paranormal News, Part 2. Alright, so, where we left off, they were talking about, something about Frankenstein's castle. The story was created on a dismal rainy summer vacation in Switzerland, where Mary Shelley and her soon-to-be husband, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and who was a famous poet, by the way, and friend Lord Byron amused themselves with opium, alcohol, and the telling of German ghost stories. They whiled away the hours discussing topics of galvanism and the occult while writing their own supernatural stories to help pass the time. One night during a terrifying nightmare, Mary had a vision which began the seed of inspiration for the classic novel. And this is a quote from her. I saw with shut eyes, but acute mental vision. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then on the working of some powerful engine shows signs of life and stir with an uneasy half-vital motion. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the Creator of the world. The next morning, Shelley began writing the short story and was later persuaded by Percy Shelley to expand the idea into a full novel, which became her greatest and most influential story that still resonates today. A mystery still remains to where Mary Shelley came up with the name Frankenstein. Mary may have visited the Darmstadt region during her travels and heard the local folklore of Berg Frankenstein and the German alchemist Johann Conrad Dippel. His life has a close parallel with Victor Frankenstein in the novel. Built in 1250 by Conrad Reiss von Bruberg, Berg Frankenstein sits on a hilltop about 5 kilometers south of Darmstadt, Germany. The once large fortress was the part of territorial and religious disputes between the Catholic Frankensteins and the Lutheran Landgraves of Hesse-Darmstadt. The family in 1662 eventually sold their possessions around the castle to the Landgraves and retired to their possessions in the Waitrau. I think I'm saying that right. The Frankenstein family died out in 1602. The castle fell into ruin in the 19th century, and along with many ruined castles of Germany, became inspiration for poets, authors, and artists traveling through the country during the Romantic era. Today, only 2 towers, the chapel and fortress walls, remain. Several legends are connected to the castle and the Frankenstein dynasty. One is of a vampire that frequented the castle in medieval times, roaming abroad at night to drink the blood of the villagers, and a young Frankenstein bride who was said to have been found pale and lifeless in one of the castle's many towers. The other tells of George von Frankenstein, the dragon killer, who liberated the people of the valley from the terror of a giant reptilian monster in the 16th century. He was mortally wounded in the battle, and his sepulchral effigy can still be seen in a nearby church. The monster beneath his feet. The most well-known legend is that of Johann Conrad Dippel. With no relation to the Frankenstein family, Dippel, who was born in 1673, died in 1734, was born and lived at Castle Frankenstein. For school purposes, Frankensteinness was known to be twice added for administrative purposes to his signature, indicating his birthplace. Dippel studied theology, alchemy, and philosophy, Folklore of the region accuses him of body snatching in an attempt to bring the dead to life. In a secret laboratory, Dipple was said to construct his experiments for the search of the secret of life by boiling bones and hair with iron flux and blood clots. He also attempted to create an elixir of life, which he claimed would keep him alive to 135 years of age, and which, upon taking it, killed him. So, interesting. Not directly paranormal, but still interesting story. Huh. Huh. Sorry, I'm just looking through these stories. Some of them are old. Trying to find some updated ones. Yeah, this is an old one. It's from 2013 about Farrah Fawcett speaking to Ryan O'Neal from Beyond the Grave, which is interesting, but it's an old story. I've already done it. So I'm going to go to a different site. Let's see. Yeah. I don't even want to get into that one. Ryan Buell of Paranormal State. I don't even want to get started. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Not sure how old or new this story is, but What the hell? This is actually from the Discovery website. Investigation Discovery's haunting new crime special, Restless Souls, seeks answers beyond the grave to close a cold case. I love this idea already. Uh, Silver Spring, Maryland, there's a saying that the dead tell no tales, but that's not always the case. Investigation Discovery's all-new special, Restless Souls, reveals what happens when a murder victim returns from beyond the grave to expose the killer's deadly secrets and avenge her untimely death. Premiering Monday, April 14th on Investigation Discovery. I guess this already came out. I didn't even know about this. But Restless Souls examines the 2004 murder mystery of Ashley Howley and how a complete stranger, psychic medium Christy Robinette, volunteered her services to help solve the case and bring closure to Howley's family. Interviews with the Robinette law enforcement and loved ones, including Howley's cousin and the family's spokesperson, Carrie Combs, illustrate the 3-year police investigation alongside Robinette's independent search for answers, using the victim's own ghostly clues as her guide. That's actually pretty cool. You know, they've always talked about how psychics have helped to solve murder cases and whatnot, but they've never, like, really followed it. You know what I mean? Like, they've never really shown the actual process of it, I guess is the best way to say it. So kudos to Discovery for being open-minded enough to even attempt that. I guess this was a while ago. It was in March of 2014, but you know, that's one thing I'll say. I wish they would advertise more. Or maybe I'm just that far out of the loop. I don't know. But still, regardless, interesting stuff. What? What the hell? Okay. I don't understand this, but we're gonna get into it. Come on. Load, you stupid thing. There we go. 14-year-old George Stinney, youngest person ever executed in the United States, required a booster seat in the electric chair. What the? Wow. At only 14 years of age, George Junius Stinney Jr. was the youngest person executed in the United States, weighing only 90 pounds. Stinney was so small he required a booster seat to reach the headpiece of the electric chair that took his last breath. Stinney had been convicted of first-degree murder and the deaths of 2 young white girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 8-year-old Mary Emma Thames. With no physical evidence in the case and only the testimony of 3 Southern police officers that Stinney had given a confession, the all-white jury convicted Stinney in less than 10 minutes. And of course, this is before the Civil Rights Movement, and this is a little black kid. This is, it's a crime that this even happened. He's basically convicted with no evidence. Oh, wow. Okay. Sorry, we're moving on. Um, New DNA tests identify Albert DeSalvo was indeed the Boston Strangler. Um, I know that may not be, big news to a lot of people out there, but there were questions about it. Um, because DeSalvo originally confessed to the 13 murders that took place in the 1960s. But then later on, he recanted his confession. And so there were some questions. Also, after his arrest, there were some similar murders. What may have actually been, people trying to bump off their wives or girlfriends or whatever and lay blame on the Boston Strangler. But in any case, a major development in the infamous Boston Strangler case happened today. The most well-known suspect in the killings, Albert DeSalvo, confessed to 13 murders in the 1960s. DeSalvo was killed in prison in 1973. Despite DeSalvo's confession, he was never charged because the confession was ruled inadmissible in court. Some say after a lengthy negotiation between the prosecutors and the defense, by the way. However, DeSalvo was sentenced to life in prison on unrelated charges involving armed robberies and sexual assaults. Now, police say DNA evidence has put them in a position to formally charge Albert DeSalvo with the murder of Mary Sullivan, the 1964 murder that is generally believed to be the last Boston Strangler victim. DNA in that case had previously been tested 10 years ago, but test procedures were new and limited. Now advancements in technology have led to the new developments. Boston police made a stunning announcement today. Wow, that is amazing. I'm not sure what this one is, but I want to see it. This one's called The Lost Letter. It's an old story. It's actually from 2012, but I don't remember this, so I'm going to read it anyways. On September 22nd, 1918, days before the end of World War I, George Kemp penned a letter to his 9-year-old nephew, Donald Templeton, from deep within the trenches in embattled France. After mailing the letter, George returned to his unruly surroundings to continue his fight to survive the perils of World War I. In the final days of the war, George lost that fight and was killed in action. His letter, it seems, was lost too. While postal authorities concede that thousands of letters are lost each year, what's unusual about this case is that the letter did eventually reach its destination 63 years later. On July 6, 1981, the letter arrived in Buffalo, New York. The original recipient, George Kemp's nephew, Mr. Templeton, had long since moved away to a new home in Florida. The new residents graciously tracked him down and forwarded the letter to the now 72-year-old boy. Postal explanation? Question mark. Postal authorities believe the letter may have spent decades possibly lodged in some piece of furniture only to be discovered when the furniture was moved or scrapped. At that time, the letter would have received a special stamp explaining the long delay and sent along its way. What they could not explain was why this particular lost article did not bear any such stamp, nor can they explain the mysterious postmarks on in 1918, one 9 years later in 1927, and the final cancellation mark in 1981. The letter was finally delivered to its original recipient. Wow. Okay. I guess that's it. Kind of interesting though. It's almost like, I don't know. It's weird. Anyways, hold on one sec. I'm just checking something. Oh, hey Cherokee. See you're in our chat. Okay, so anyways, continuing on. Um, really? This is from October 20th, 2015, and this goes into some conspiracy stuff that I don't want to get into because I'll rant and rave. But ultimately, it wouldn't surprise me a bit. Let's just say. But the headline says NASA's Project Bluebeam and the government's plan to use holographic projection to create a new world order. Project Bluebeam is rumored to be NASA's attempt to implement a new world order via simulated holographic projections such as the second coming of Jesus or an alien invasion. The theory was first published by Canadian journalist Serge Monast in 1991 and later published his theory in his book Project Bluebeam, shortly before dying under suspicious circumstances of a heart attack in 1996. Wow, okay. Yeah, I'm not getting into that whole thing because I'll rant and rave and everything else. I am, I guess, what you could label a conspiracy nut, sort of. Um, and I don't want to get into all that because what's the point? But let's just say that I'm a big fan of freedom and liberty. I fought and I bled for those things, along with thousands of my brothers in uniform. I'm a big believer in our constitutional rights, and apparently our government isn't. Um, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. Let's see. Not touching that one. Okay, let's see. The Cokeville Miracle, the American tragedy that never happened. On May 16, 1986, when former Town Marshal David Gary Young and his wife Doris Young took 154 children and 13 teachers hostage at Cokeville Elementary School in Wyoming and kept them at bay with a shopping cart-sized bomb attached to 5 hairpin trigger blast caps. It should have ended in great tragedy, one of the worst in American history. Yes, the bomb did explode, and exploded in a room packed full of children, but the only persons to die that day were Mr. Young and his wife, what is called the Cokeville miracle. The lives of the children and teachers were spared. If you ask residents of the town how such a thing could happen, they will look at you, smile, and answer in one word: angels. That's freaking amazing. Okay, for the record, I'm not Christian. I'm not going to bag on Christians. Whatever you have to believe to get through the day is fine by me, as long as you're not hurting anybody. But don't you dare judge me for my beliefs either. That is my whole outlook on religion. Okay? That being said, I do, however, believe in things like angels and demons. I have to. I've seen them. Huh. Darren Dion Van, authorities fear alleged Indiana strangler serial killer may have been active for 2 decades or more. His first known victim was 19-year-old Africa Hardy, a known prostitute in Hammond, Indiana, who advertised her services on the Illinois area of Backpage.com on October 17, 2014. A female friend helped Africa arrange a meeting with 43-year-old Darren Dion Van in a Motel 6 at 3840 179th Street in Hammond, Indiana. Soon thereafter, the friend began receiving suspicious text messages from Africa's phone. Alarmed and concerned for Africa's safety, she called a male friend who went to the Motel 6 to check on her. There at around 9:30 p.m., the man found Africa's strangled body in the bathtub. Wow. That's just freaking sad. This has got to be frustrating. I really... Oh, I know a lot of people don't like cops and whatnot, but I got to tell you, I kind of do, in a way. You know, of, I'm not talking about, there's good and bad in everything, I guess, and I'm not talking about, jackbooted thugs here with badges. What I'm talking about is real cops. Um, and this would frustrate the hell out of me. I would lose my mind if this were me investigating this case that I'm about to tell you about. Lewis Clark Valley serial killer 35 years later. Frustrated police know who killer is but lack evidence to make arrest. That right there, I shouldn't even have to read anymore. That should be enough to tell you how frustrating and pissed off I would probably be. Life in the Lewis Clark Valley grows complicated after a serial killer strikes their quiet rural communities. Hold on one sec. Um, Life in rural America is supposed to be relaxing, simple, and even mundane. But for 3 years in the late 70s, life in communities in and around the Lewis Clark Valley was anything but ordinary. Parents shuffled their youth to school in groups, and children were told to never be alone outside after dark. During those 3 years, 5 youths had disappeared when human body parts were found wrapped in black garbage bags floating in the nearby Snake River. Police knew they had a serial killer running rampant in their community. Uh, in hold on. In fact, they were even certain they knew who the killer was. Regardless, lack of evidence in one critical missing person rendered them unable to make an arrest of the person they were 99% sure committed the evil acts. A person of interest runs free. From early on in the investigation, police felt quite certain that their person of interest was the man responsible for the disappearances and presumed murders of the 5 unfortunate youths. The suspect had readily admitted to being the last person to see 2 of the 5 victims alive, and police were fairly certain that two others had vanished from a location the suspect admitted to being in at the time of their disappearance. Still without concrete evidence, police were unable to file charges. The Lewis Clark Valley area, from early on in their investigation, police felt quite certain that their person of interest was the man responsible, blah, blah, blah. Police were unable to file charges. The Lewis Clark Valley area triangle of cities, Lewiston, Clarkson, and Asotin, located along the border of Washington and Idaho, was named after the Lewis and Clark expedition, which had camped at the confluence of the Clearwater and Snake Rivers during their westward journey across the United States. Like 6 miles downriver from Asotin, Washington, the area is Asotin, I think it's Asotin. The area is a beautiful oasis of rivers, forests, and rolling prairie flatland. It is very isolated from any major cities, and area residents like it that way. But despite their isolation from the evils of major metropolitan areas during the late 1970s for 3 years, Lewis and Clark Valley was exposed to a demon of their own, one that many felt they knew the true identity of but were powerless to exorcise from the community. To date, the killer remains free. That's horrible. And his victimology was all over the board, too. Men, women. Mostly women. Damn. I can't even imagine being those cops. I really can't, because, look, I mean, aside from the fact that it's your job to catch these guys, aside from the fact that you sacrifice so much to do that job, you have to go on after there's nothing else you can do, knowing that every time another body drops, you were powerless to do anything about it. That is hard. I know that's hard. I don't even have to experience it to know that it's hard. I know I couldn't do it. I, I could never be a cop. I'm telling you right now, I could never be a freaking cop because, not because I don't like cops, I do. I have cops in my family. The reason I could never be a cop is for a very simple reason. I would kill too many fucking criminals. I have zero tolerance. I did do a story on this guy a while back, and we now know that the headline alone tells you. The Axeman serial killer of New Orleans from 1918 to 1919. During several years in the early 1900s, New Orleans teetered on the brink of panic after a string of horrendous murders that were as gruesome as they were terrifying. Reminiscent of an American version of Jack the Ripper, the axe-wielding serial killer known as Axeman broke into homes across New Orleans in the middle of the night and savagely hacked his sleeping victims with an axe before quietly slipping away into the darkness. As with Jack the Ripper murders that occurred in London during the late 1880s, a canonical list of victims was attributed to the Axeman serial killer, but in truth, nobody's sure how many victims died by his hand. Regardless, by the time the attack suddenly ended in October of 1919, at least a dozen people had been attacked, with at least 6 people hacked to death in bloody fashion. The Axeman was never caught, and his identity remains unknown. Between 1911 and 1912, a few years before the official Axeman murders, several gruesome axe murders occurred in New Orleans. Though accounts are sketchy, we know that a New Orleans newspaper article printed during the height of the Axeman murders in 1918 contained an interview with a retired police detective who compared the Axeman attacks to several Italian grocers who had been murdered by an axe-wielding maniac from 1911 through 1912. The victims of the 1911 assaults, couples in most cases, had been asleep in their beds when someone broke through the panels in the back doors of their homes and killed them in their sleep with an axe. So it's feasible that this person committing these crimes could have started even earlier. Which is what is interesting to me, however, being a history buff, is its proximity to World War I as it was happening at the same time. And 1918, by the way, is just after World War I ended. Or just before. I forget. I think it ended in 1917. But it could be 1919. I'm not sure. You can check that out yourself. But it's interesting that they draw that parallel between him and Jack the Ripper. And where they were kind of going with it is that maybe the X-Men was in fact Jack the Ripper, and I suppose that is sort of possible. But we do know now that Jack the Ripper was in fact Aaron Kosminski, as correctly identified by the short-lived show Killer Contact, and then a year later affirmed, if you will, by DNA evidence as Aaron Kosminski. What we don't know is if he ever came to America, or if he ever went to New Orleans, for that matter. But even if he did, it would be a complete change in not only his modus operandi, his MO, but also in his victimology, because he went from women to couples. Israel Keyes' meticulous serial killer's body count may never be known. Serial killer Israel Keyes is a type of serial killer the public and police fear. One that is so wily and meticulous, a complete story of his murders may never be known. Keyes is believed to have embarked on a decade-long murder spree which may have included more than a dozen murder victims. The FBI have linked Keyes to at least 11 killings and feel that they may never know the true body count. That is a spooky statement. And I know you're probably asking yourself, what does all this have to do with paranormal? Well, I'm glad you asked. In my personal experience, a lot of these victims become ghosts. And I could dig up, you know, actual paranormal reports associated, but I'm not going to, because I'm just going to move on. Oh my god, I actually remember this one. Um, and I'm only going to mention it briefly because I want to move on to other things. But as I was scrolling down, I came across it. The Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway, killed nearly 50 prostitutes. Wow. Alright, let me check and see how much time I have. None. Time's up, folks. That is it. I want to thank you all for tuning in.